Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Alison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Hey, preschool peeps.
Hi, peeps.
Today's episode has to do with paying attention.
And I laugh because I am so horrible at it.
You know, we work in an environment where young children seem to flitter from one thing to another. And we'll talk about how they have short attention spans, which is true. The studies show that children about, I think it's 4 years old, have an average attention span of 8 to 12 minutes. It's not long. I'm going to just tell you that sometimes my attention span feels about that long to me. Or that short to me.
Yes.
There are times where when I also struggle to be more attentive. I think especially in this very quick-paced, very technology and screen-based world, I think it's eaten away at my ability to pay attention to things, honestly.
I agree with that. I feel like I've always had a little bit of trouble with paying attention, but it's way worse now. And I thought as I got older, it would get better, but instead I feel like it's gotten worse.
It's heading in the other direction. Maybe as you get older, you head back to the attention span you had when you were younger, kind of like your hearing, right? They tested your hearing when you were young, and then they test your hearing again when you're older. So maybe it's one of those things where you end up going back. But I thought that it would be valuable for us and our preschool peeps to think about the 6 components of being attentive, because I think anywhere along the line of these 6 components could be where a child struggles. As we talk about this, though, we have to keep in mind that the prefrontal cortex of their brain, the part of the brain right behind their forehead, is not developed yet. And it controls a lot of things, including impulse control. So children are going to be very, very tempted by their impulses. Not to say many adults are not, but even more than adults, most children are very, very tempted by those impulses. They don't have control over them yet.
Right.
But the fact remains that there are 6 components to being attentive that, regardless of the age you're at, I think apply. Right?
Yeah. I think regardless of the age you're at. Yes, absolutely.
You need these to be established and built and working together.
Yeah.
So we'll go through those 6 and talk about them maybe as we go, Alison.
Yeah.
The first one is alertness. And it's becoming mentally aware of external stimuli. Here's the thing about alertness and young children. They can't even get past that first step of paying attention, the being alert, if they are tired and haven't gotten enough sleep at night, if they are hungry. They can't even get past that. And that's step 1.
And I feel like you've just described every child, right? They're either hungry or they're tired, there's never enough sleep or food to go around, So
they're very often hungry and tired.
Yeah.
Think about how you feel. I've had, where I'll go a week or 2 without being able to sleep well. Mm-hmm. And I can feel that I'm not as attentive and alert and sharp. I'm not as sharp.
Yeah.
When that happens.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're just not, like, your body hasn't been fueled properly, right? So it's like your body needs a certain amount of sleep to survive. And maybe one night wouldn't really bug you. But if you're doing 5 nights in a row, that's going to catch up, where your brain's going to be like, you know what, I got to concentrate on some other things, like not falling asleep in order to, you know what I mean? And then your alertness is going to go out the window.
I think for children, even if they have a couple of nights where they don't sleep well, that it severely impacts their alertness. Because they're such, their emotions are so big, and the thinking centers of their brain are just developing. And so I think it has a huge impact. So it's sleep, nutrition, exercise. When you sit in the same place all the time, it's so hard to stay alert. You just your body just relaxes into that spot. It's why we have to have this alternating of children sitting and moving to keep them alert.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Plus, I think when you're constantly looking at the same thing, say you're sitting in the same spot all day, right? And you're just looking at the same stuff all day. There's no change of scenery. There's no change of movement. There's no change of positioning. Your alertness is going to go down because you're like, yeah, we saw this already. Cool. I don't need to pay attention to it anymore. You're not going to be as alert. You're not going to be as aware of what's going on around you because you're like, yeah, whatever. We've been here all day. Like there's no need to pay attention. The wall looks the same. The people are the same. My position is the same. Like there's no need to pay attention. So your brain is like, I'm not going to pay attention. Like I can put that to the side. I don't need to be alert here because we're in a spot where it's identical to what it was 5 minutes ago.
So basically we're saying sleep, nutrition, movement, and change of scenery a little bit will help to keep you alert.
Yes.
Even if you go over by a window where there's fresh air, it makes you more alert, right? To open windows sometimes, even when it's a little bit cold, and just breathe in the fresh air, it'll bring back that alertness, because being alert is step one. Step two is your brain's ability to select the most important stimulus. So there's constantly things going on around us. And think about young children in an early childhood program. They have, 10 to 20 same age peers most of the time, sometimes multiple ages of children, depending on your setting, could be mixed age, but they've got all these classmates. People are talking, people are moving, people are playing with things, people are, there's noises, there's chairs being pushed in, there's the scraping of the chair on the floor, there's the people talking to each other, there's toys being picked up and put down, and maybe those toys make noise. So there's constantly stimuli just coming into your senses, and your brain needs to be able to pick out what's the most important stimuli. And then step three is to avoid the distractions, avoid the less important stimuli. For example, a child who is pushing in a chair, a human could get very fixated on that sound.
Yes.
Right. So let's say the teacher is talking with everybody during large group time and talking about what we're going to do today, but your brain doesn't filter out the sound of that chair being pushed in behind you. Then it's very hard to attend to the teacher. And I have to say, it is one of these as you get older things. So I used to, when I was young, I used to be able to do homework with background music. I would put on music or the TV. I would put the TV on and I would sit there doing my homework. I can't do that anymore. If I'm going to be working, the TV has to be off. The music has to be off. I simply can't do it.
I'm a little bit like that with certain things. And then there's other things I can do with total background noise and just like not care. And I think it depends on where I'm at. Like I could read a book in, say, like the doctor office waiting room, because I don't really care about what people are talking about. Right. It does, like what's going on there has no bearing in my life whatsoever. So I can concentrate on my book. But if I was somewhere, say with my friends or something, I wouldn't be able to, because I'd be like constantly wanting to know what's going on. I want to be in the know, so like, I think children kind of can do that sometimes too, is like, if they're playing in the block area, they can maybe tune out what's going on in dramatic play for a little while, unless maybe their good friend is over in dramatic play. And all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, let me keep one ear over there and one ear here. You know what I mean? Like, I think it kind of can depend.
That's a conscious thing though. I think the selection here is when your brain can't do it. Like when you can consciously decide, I want to keep an eye on the people over there. We've all done it. You ever overhear someone in a restaurant talking and it like, catches your ear and you're like, what is happening over there? So I think we can decide to divide our attention, but for some people, it's not even a decision. It's just they can't filter it out. And I could be wrong here. And you're welcome to write to us and correct me. I think one of the issues that people struggle with who have ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, hyperactivity disorder, and ADD, attention deficit disorder, now falls under that umbrella. It's not really a separate diagnosis. But I think that one of the things that they really struggle with is that their brains don't know what is the more important and the less important stimuli. And so everything that happens, they pay attention
Yeah.
to, they turn toward, and they can't filter out and think, okay, right now, your brain doesn't know, pay attention to the teacher who's talking. That's the most
Right.
important stimuli.
Right.
Where,
Yeah.
like for me, I don't struggle with ADHD, so I can usually understand which is the most important stimuli. I just can't work with background music. But that whole
Right.
thing, don't you think that whole thing speaks to the fact that that age-old thing in preschool, there should always be music playing?
Oh
No,
my
some children
goodness.
can't attend them.
I, as a teacher, can't do it. Okay. And I worked at a
Right.
school where they're like, you need to have background music on all the time. And
No.
it would just, I couldn't do it. And so then I would find like this compromise of like, okay, maybe I can do it if it's like quiet music, like classical music or something. But if it had like words in it and it was like all kind of like that jumpy, like high pitched kind of like, I could not concentrate. And it drove me crazy that the school said, no, you're required to have music on all the time. Because I'm like, that's not, it really isn't fair to the children that need quiet to concentrate, So
I don't think a lot of programs do that anymore. I think
No,
we've
I-
realized that it's too auditorily chaotic.
yes.
But if you're still thinking, no, I need the music in the background or the sounds in the background, not while all the children are running around and playing and there's so much auditory
Right.
stimuli, not then. If you
Yeah.
want to have soft music without lyrics when children are resting, that's fine. If
Mhm.
you want to have a time when we're using music because we're all singing and dancing to it,
Yeah.
that's fine. But during free play time,
Yeah.
no,
I can't
no
even, it's
music in
too
the
much.
background. There's
It's
too much
way too much for
already.
me. Yeah. It's too much for
Yeah,
me. I put
too
on
much already.
quiet music during like sometimes breakfast time just to have a little bit there. But they're eating, but once it's time to like clean up and go into play mode, like, no, like I can't, I cannot do it. So I don't really want it on for them either. I want them to concentrate on
Even
what they want
during
to concentrate
eating,
on.
I think
Yeah.
it's priorities, right? I think it's so if
Yeah.
I want them to be socializing with each other and that's where I want their attention, then maybe turn the music off.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Depends
Yeah.
on what you want them to be doing.
Yeah.
So again, to recap so far, the children need to be alert. They need to be able to select the most important sensory stimuli that's coming in, whether it's a sight, a sound, a taste, a touch.
Mhm.
I missed one. Sight, a sound, a taste, touch.
Sight, sound,
A smell.
taste,
A smell.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the most important stimuli coming in through my senses? And then the brain needs to be able to filter out the rest so that you can pay attention to that one thing.
Right.
The smell thing reminds me of this. I one time smelled something in my home and I was like determined to find the root of that smell. It was like it was terrible. And I was determined to find the root of that smell. And I'm just walking around breathing in and sniffing everywhere I go. So the stimuli that I was paying most attention to in that moment was the smell. And I found it like in the refrigerator. But if other stimuli were distracting me, I may never have found it.
Well, it's also like
concentrating on the smell.
Well, also at schools, certain schools, ones that have kitchens and they're cooking lunch for you.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as the children can smell those kitchen smells, those they cannot concentrate anymore. They're either trying to figure out what is for lunch, what is that smell, or if they already know what the smell is, like if it's something like pretty common, like a spaghetti sauce or something, they're like, well, we know when it is. Now when's lunch? Is it lunchtime? Is it lunchtime? Is it lunchtime? And that's all they're thinking about. And all of a sudden you're all hungry, even though you might not have normally been, because you smell it,
So smell is one of the strongest senses, right? It takes over.
Yes, it totally takes over.
And it's hard to filter that out.
Yeah. And I've worked at schools where you could smell the cafeterias, cooking, or the kitchen cooking. And it is, even as an adult, hard to concentrate,
I think it's because smell is so closely associated to memory.
Yes.
And I think that's the brain gets like overactive with smells.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there they are, and their brains are trying to filter out the less important stimuli. And then the next component of being able to pay attention is duration. It's the amount of time that you can stay focused on a given stimuli. And that for children is really hard. We just said the average attention span for young children, even very young, is like 4 to 6 minutes. And then it goes to like 8 to 12 minutes. Really hard for them to pay attention for a long time. But we can do things to help stretch that duration gently. For example, if you're reading to the children, the book is slightly longer than their normal attention span, but they're very interested in the topic of the book, then you might be able to get them to sit there longer. But they have to be super interested then. If you are doing some sort of exploration or experiment that they're very interested in, they might attend longer than their average. And the key here, I think, to stretching the duration is the children have to be very, very interested in what you're doing. Because when they're very interested, their brains do filter other things out. They will be alert and they can last with you there for a longer duration.
Yeah. That's why I think it's important to study things that the children are interested in, because they will pay attention to it more likely, than something they're not interested in. Yeah.
Yes, definitely something that interests them.
Yeah.
The next component of attention is preview, and that's determining the best course of action in a situation. So I'm getting stimuli and I'm deciding what's my next best course of action. And if the stimuli that's coming in doesn't make sense and I can't figure that out, I lose the attention to it. This is what it reminds me of. It reminds me of when you go to hear a lecture or a sermon or something like that, and you're not quite sure where it's going. You ever have that situation where you're sitting there like, where is this person going with this?
Yes. Yeah.
And then your mind begins to wander, which is going to be a topic for our next episode, by the way. Mind wandering, the pros, the cons, and it actually has benefits. But as soon as I start to think, where is this going? I can't pay attention to what they're saying or have said anymore because I'm only concerned about this preview. I don't know where this is going. I don't know what my next thoughts. There can be no foreshadowing because I don't know where this person is taking this conversation. And we become very, very like just worried about, what is this person thinking? Where is this going anywhere? Where is this going? And then, what am I going to think next?
Yes, because, or for me, sometimes I'm like, am I the only one confused here? And then I start concentrating, like looking around, like, am I the only one that doesn't get what's going on here? It's like being in one of those movies that you don't understand, like where it's going. And you're like looking around, you're like, how come everybody else understands this? And I don't. And then I'm concentrating on my own stupidity rather than like maybe the movie that would make sense.
Okay, but then you find out later that nobody understood it. When you talk to people, people are like, yeah, no, I didn't know where that was going. That was just horrible. And we don't enjoy when we don't know where it's going because again, you can't pay attention because that's too disturbing. So there needs to be, when we're doing things with children, they need to be able to preview and determine their next best course of action in this situation, which means we can't come flying out of nowhere with nonsense. And we have to be like a little bit of straightforward thinking. And then the sixth component of being able to pay attention, it's interesting. It's called self-monitoring. And it's when you internally assess the situation and regulate and modify your behavior. It's kind of like when you're sitting there and you realize, like, I'll be sitting and listening to something or watching something, and I realize I'm tapping my foot. And that tapping action is drawing my attention away. That's when I will sort of be like, okay, I have to stop tapping my foot so I can pay attention. Self-monitoring. Also like this, I will be watching something on TV and attempting to do like the Wordle at the same time. And I'll realize I can't pay attention to what's happening on the TV because the Wordle has distracted me.
Right.
And so I have a choice.
What you were watching. Yes.
Right. Like I have a choice at this point. I can put the Wordle down or I can forget the TV show. Self-monitoring.
Yes, that's true. I found several times too, where I'm like, oh, I didn't catch that. Let me go back 5 minutes. And then something else gets me. And I'm like, same 5 minutes, got to go back. Like, I think sometimes it's just hard to self-monitor, you know?
It is.
Especially if you don't know what it is that like with your foot tapping one, you're like, okay, easy. I'll stop tapping my foot. But sometimes you don't know what it is. And you're like, all right. And I don't know what's causing me to not see this 5 minutes of the TV show, but my mind keeps going, you know? And I think that's sometimes hard. Like if it's something easy that you can fix, then you fix it. But if you don't know, then now I'm sitting there trying to figure out like, why can't I do this? What is it that's distracting me? Now I'm distracted by my own distraction.
Yeah. You know, I think young children don't necessarily get to that step 6, but there are things we can do before that for them. We can cut down on the stimuli, not have as much. And I'm not just talking about sounds either. I'm talking about sights. Not as much stuff on your walls. We've talked about this before. Your walls can't be cluttered. Your shelves can't be cluttered. They have to be neat and they have to be orderly so that it's not too much visual stimuli.
It always bugged me when I worked at the elementary school. They had all these anchor charts all over the walls. And to me, I would walk in and be like super distracted. And when I taught kindergarten, I didn't have any anchor charts on the walls because I just didn't believe that was a good, like, it was just too distracting. But there's some classrooms you walk in where it's like wall to wall stuff hanging on the walls. And it's so easy to get your mind to be like, oh, let me look at that. Let me read what's on there. Like, I feel like less is more kind of thing when it comes to that.
So keep in mind, everybody, less is more.
Less is more.
Also, whatever we can do to help families understand the importance of sleep. We've done an episode about that, but whatever we can do to help them understand that their children cannot be alert unless certain things are taking place. So we would like that to happen. I think if we notice that a child is very, very tired or very, very hungry, we should be doing something about that. Bless you.
Sorry. Thank you.
I think, when a child is super tired, we should be able to let them rest. When a child is very hungry, we should give them nutrition, because how else do we expect them to be alert? And we have to give them little clues too. Sometimes I'll say to children who, when I'm talking to them and their minds I see them not paying attention anymore. And I'll say, did you hear my words? And I'll point to my mouth. Pointing to my mouth is a clue. It's a clue where they should be paying attention. So those sort of nonverbal clues about where they should be paying attention, very gently and kindly and respectfully, are good. Yeah. And see if they're very interested in what you're doing, and if you can stretch the duration of time that they pay attention. That's a good invisible muscle to stretch, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have, for our next episode, we have some really interesting information about mind wandering, something that children seem to do all the time, and we have some very basic questions about it. So we hope that you will come back for our next episode. And if you would like to share anything having to do with this podcast or our episodes, go check out our website, howpreschoolteachersdoit.com. There's a contact form. We are also on Facebook. Go see us there. And please communicate with us. We love to hear from everybody. All right, preschool peeps, go ponder all this and then come back next week to learn about mind wandering.
Yeah. Bye, peeps.
All right. Catch you next time, peeps.